2024 baseball season is officially over. Welcome into Fantasy Baseball today on Tuesday, November 5th, and welcome to the offseason. I am Frank Stampfl, joined by Chris Towers. No Scott White this week, getting some well-deserved time off. Today on the show, we're taking a break from our position recaps because a lot has happened since we last recorded, which was last Tuesday night. So the World Series has ended. The Dodgers are World Series champs, which means the Yankees are losers, of course. Chris went out to First Pitch Arizona, and the offseason is up and running. We had some options exercised and declined. We have qualifying offers. A trade was made, and we will take a look at some of the big-name free agents this offseason, kind of a, mini offseason primer, if you will. But let's just start with the World Series, Chris, because I would assume baseball fans everywhere are rejoicing, because the Dodgers defeated the Yankees in 5 games. Congrats to the Dodgers and their fans. I mean, this series was a microcosm of the Yankee season. I mean, how many times did I tweet it out or come into our StreamYard room angry because the Yankees are kicking the ball around or running the bases terribly? And that's exactly what we saw in the World Series.
I tweeted something. I think it was after Anthony Volpe's ridiculous base running blunder in Game 4. Which he made up for. He actually had a very good series and a very good postseason overall. And I think there's a lot of interesting things to talk about with him if we want to at some point. But it was after that one where I think he was on second and he didn't score on a double off the wall. And I just tweeted, the Yankees are not a serious team.
No.
And then they went on to win that game and very comfortably. And I was like, uh-oh, am I going to look like now? They went on to prove me right in pretty dramatic fashion in Game 5, and I don't know, they're one of the 2 or 3 best teams in baseball, and I think a lot of people are acting like the Yankees were never good, and that's clearly not true. But yeah, there's some dumbness on that team. There's just like, they do dumb things with alarming regularity. And by the way, I want to go back to one thing real quick. Your little blunder at the beginning of the show where you said 2020. I wanted to make a joke about how that's a Jimmy Rollins, the 2020 season. Only half right. You know, there were 2 guys in the 2007 season to have 20 home runs, 20 stolen bases, and 20 triples.
I was going to ask what the other 20 was.
Triples is best.
Who else?
And Curtis Granderson,
the
Detroit Tigers, had the only 2 guys since Willie Mays in 1957 to have 20 home runs, 20 steals, and 20 triples in a season, and they both did it in 2007. That's weird. All right, that's all. We can go back to the Yankees.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny how like we come away from the World Series and we're just talking about how bad the Yankees were. And they were. I mean, but the Dodgers took advantage. Obviously, they are a seasoned team. They've kind of been there, done that. And I don't know. It just kind of felt that way all around. I don't know if maybe the moment was a little bit too big for the Yankees. It felt like Aaron Boone had some questionable managerial decisions. And again, like that 5th inning of Game 5 was just a comedy of errors. It's just Aaron Judge, who hadn't made an error all season long, drops a routine fly ball.
Just right in his glove.
Bad throw from Volpe to third base. He's a Gold Glove shortstop. And then obviously like the Rizzo, like Garrett Cole not covering. Yeah. Although I saw some like,
I don't think they would have gotten him either way.
Yeah, like it would have been close, but like there was spin on the ball. So I don't know. I think you could defend that one a little bit more.
I think it was more a Garrett Cole play than an Anthony Rizzo play, I think.
Yeah.
But I don't think they were particularly likely to get the out either way.
Yeah. But I'll tell you what, as a fan, one of the most frustrating series I've ever watched in my life. And yeah, I mean, it almost feels like the Yankees didn't, like the Dodgers didn't win the series. The Yankees lost it. Although that kind of feels like I'm not giving the Dodgers credit. It's just like, I wanted to see more games and it just felt like we were kind of robbed of seeing more baseball. But ultimately, talent over fundamentals, I guess, is kind of this Yankee season mantra. But shout out to the Dodgers. They took advantage and congrats to their fans. You guys are World Series champions and can't take that away. So here we are. We're into the offseason. Chris, you went out to First Pitch Arizona. Your first time there?
Yeah.
How was it?
It was super fun, man. Big thanks to Brent and Ray and all the guys at Baseball HQ for putting together. It's a super fun event, very fantasy focused. And if you want to meet a bunch of very cool people and talk fantasy baseball for a weekend and go see a game and order Whataburger for breakfast 2 days in a row like I did when I was out there, you can do that.
Did you get out to Hen House at all?
Everyone went like the Sunday morning, and I did not fall asleep until about 4. And I did not wake up in time to get out there, unfortunately. So and then my flight got delayed on Sunday. Then traveling west to east just ruins your whole day because you lose the hours going back. So that's the leaving was the worst part, let me tell you.
And then so you get the hourly change going from East Coast, West Coast, and then obviously back. And then we have the daylight savings on top of that.
That was the best thing about it, though, is Arizona does not mess with daylight savings time. So that falling asleep at 4, I did not have to deal with also losing an hour. So like I only slept for like 4.5 hours, but at least it wasn't 9:30 when I woke up instead of 8:30. So that was that. Got to give Arizona props there. It's a little weird that they're in a different time zone at different points in the season or the year, but no daylight saving switch. Love that.
Yeah. Look, I didn't get out there this year, and obviously, super bummed, and obviously FOMO, just seeing all like the videos and the pictures and people playing wiffle ball, and everyone's out at the games and all this stuff, and panels and live podcasts. So
I met Welsh in person for the first time ever.
He's tall, right?
Very tall. I knew he was tall. He gives off tall guy vibes. But we only hung out for a couple of minutes, unfortunately. So that's another reason I have to get back out there next year.
Look, just highly, highly recommend. If anyone's ever been on the fence about going to this event, just go. Just make a weekend out of it. It is just a tremendous time from, just everyone is there for like the same reasons. Tight-knit fantasy baseball industry. Everyone's catching up, having drinks, eating good food, and then obviously the panels and the live podcasts, as I mentioned, and getting out to games. It's a really cool, just kind of like culmination of like the end of the fantasy baseball season and then kind of the start of the off season, and everyone's just kind of starting to think about the next year as well. So it's just a really cool event.
Kind of. There were like a dozen drafts during it as well.
Yeah, and I had so much FOMO that I jumped in an early draft myself because I just couldn't help myself. Anyway, we're going to talk about some of the things you learned while you were out there, and then we'll get into some of this offseason stuff again, all those options happening, and there was a trade between the Braves and the Angels. But let's start off with this first thing that you learned from a panel between Jason Collette and Joe Arico. We're going to reference lots of analysts today and what you learned from those guys. Anyone that I mentioned, feel free to follow them because they're obviously great people here. They were doing a panel on 2024 statistical trends, and they noted that you can usually tell what direction the offensive environment will be for the entire season based on trends from the first 10 to 15 games. So I went back and I just kind of back tested this just the past 3 years to kind of measure the accuracy. And so I looked through April 15th. I looked at batting average, OPS, ISO, home run to fly ball rate. And then I also looked what it was by season's end. And it's pretty accurate. The differences are like negligible. Obviously, home run to fly ball rate does jump up a little bit throughout the course of the season because the weather heats up and the ball flies out and all that. But it would jump from maybe, for example, like 11% in the first 15 days to 11.6% by the end of the season. So yeah, it's a little bit of a jump, but nothing crazy.
And that's the key. We're talking about, because we talk about a lot how offense is down in April, and it always has been. The addition of the humidor seems to have exacerbated that trend over the past couple of seasons to where there's even more of a distinction between the cold weather month and the warm weather months of the season. But it's the trend, right? If offense is down 10 days into the season, that probably means offense is going to be down that year.
Yeah. And that's exactly what I was going to get at. Just how do we kind of bring this into the fantasy baseball scope, right? And kind of sucks because it doesn't really help us before the season when
Yeah.
trying to figure out our draft strategy and, okay, do I need more offense this year? Do I need more pitching? But if you really pay attention to those first couple of weeks and you notice that offense is up in general, then that should tell you that A, you're going to need more offense to compete, and B, high-end pitching is going to be more scarce. It's going to be harder to come by. And the inverse of that, if offense looks down the first couple of weeks of the season. So I would say just remember this and maybe take advantage early on. Like if you really think it's going to be a better offensive environment, just try and buy super low on Francisco Lindor when he has a bad first month. Or again, the inverse, if you think you're going to need more pitching, just go out and maybe trade for like a struggling ace early on in the season. So that was my biggest takeaway for that.
Yeah, and hopefully people listening to this podcast specifically know by now that Francisco Lindor having a bad April means nothing, except that he's not going to put up the numbers you want in April, but the numbers will be there at the end. Don't be the person trading Francisco Lindor. But yeah, I think it's an early indicator of what kind of environment we're going to be looking at, and it's an opportunity to we're not saying like, oh, just buy guys who get off to bad start or good starts or, whatever. Like it's your opinion of players shouldn't change 10 to 15 days into the season. But if you went into 2024 expecting offense to look like it did in 2023, the first 10 to 15 days of the season told us, no, this is a down year for offense. This is going to be a year where pitching is easier to find and power specifically is not. And that is the way that you can use that early on and, try to take advantage of those early trends before people really notice them. So I thought that was an interesting point that they brought up.
Yeah, 100%. I feel like whenever we talk about April offense, we kind of almost exaggerate how bad it is. But I think kind of the way the season works out is April is pretty bad for offense. And then May picks up a little bit. And then maybe you kind of see things June, July kind of like balloon. And then August, September, it comes back down. So like everything kind of evens out, by the end of the season. But yeah, I thought it stood out to me as well.
One thing that was a real point of discussion throughout that I don't think we're going to get to in this show is and you asked me about whether Derek Carty was there because he's one of the smartest and most scientifically founded analysts in baseball, and specifically one thing that he's been really good at the last few years is identifying and projecting changes in offensive environment based on the environment that the games are going to be played in. So when the humidor was introduced, he had some really good stuff about how that was likely to impact based on environment. And we're going to have 2 of the 30 major league teams in 2025 playing in different parks, in completely different environments. And specifically, we don't know where Tampa is going to play and what that's going to mean. But Oakland is going from what has been a pretty extreme pitching environment to Sacramento, which is a minor league park. It's hot in Sacramento, much warmer than it is in Oakland generally. And that could, when we talk about changes, the A's, I think, play like 9 of their first 15 at home.
So we should be able to learn at least maybe a little something then.
We should get a pretty good, and I'm hopeful that, there's a lot of things that are changing about that park from when it's been and will continue to be a AAA park. I think there's going to be a AAA team playing there, right?
That I'm actually not sure.
They're taking out the artificial turf and installing grass, and they're doing some construction to the park that could change things, but we should know how that's going to play. But also just those are confounding variables when comparing 2025 to 2024 that we'll have to keep in mind. Is it's only 1 park out of 30 or 2 parks out of 30 with Tampa, but that will make the 1-to-1 comparisons a little different.
Yeah. I think, we could see more offense out of the Oakland A's. And I know Steamer projections just came out. Lawrence Butler to the moon, baby. Lawrence Butler, top 20 outfielder projected by Steamer right now, which is just tremendous. Get in drafts now while you can before that price tag gets out of control on Lawrence Butler. A bunch of other things to talk about from your trip out to First Pitch Arizona. Just want to quickly mention that We got to interview Ryan Howard last week, like former Philly great, and I didn't really get a chance to promote it because it was just like kind of sprung on us, like, you know, out of nowhere. Not out of nowhere, but like, you know, I just didn't really have enough time to promote it. But it was a great interview. Ryan Howard was awesome. He talked about clutch hitting in the World Series, what happened with the Phillies this year, Juan Soto landing spots this offseason, MLB rule changes that he would like to see, and more. So make sure to go back and check that out. You could listen, you could watch on demand as well. And speaking of watching, if you are watching right now on YouTube, you'll notice my background looks a little bit different. Yeah, I'm experimenting here, trying some different things out. I got these colorful lights behind me. So, you know, you show up every day and it looks a little bit different. That's the reason why. Let's take our first break. When we return, what else did Chris learn out of First Pitch Arizona? We'll do that right after this.
Get ready for more UEFA Champions League action.
Absolutely astonishing. It's an exceptional goal.
It's been bonkers football. It's the UEFA Champions League on CBS Sports Network and stream every match live on Paramount Plus.
Welcome back in. What did Chris learn out of First Pitch Arizona? Well, next up, Bryce Miller introduced a knuckle curve mid-season that helped propel his breakout. He also had a 30% strikeout rate at home compared to 18% on the road, and that was from a pitcher panel that you did with Nick Pollock, Alex Chamberlain, and Paul Sporer, which that's quite the quartet.
Yeah, it was a good group. It was a little intimidating, you know.
Those guys are
those are some smart dudes and me.
No. So the first start that I noticed Bryce Miller started during his knuckle curve, at least according to Fangraphs game logs, was June 29th. And over his final 15 starts, a 1.94 ERA, a .91 whip, right around a strikeout per inning, a 25% strikeout rate, 113 stuff plus. And that note about his home road splits, I don't think it's really surprising either, although it is drastic. T-Mobile Park in Seattle has the highest strikeout park factor of any park in baseball. And I guess that was just exaggerated here for Bryce Miller.
Yeah, that was another big topic of conversation at First Pitch Arizona, is just how extreme Seattle's pitching environment seems to have become. And, you know, I know, Saris is pretty excited. Did Jorge Polanco, is he a free agent? Did they pick up that option?
No, yeah, that was declined. He's a
okay. So yeah, that's one that I know he's really excited about, Jorge Polanco getting out of Seattle and hopefully being able to take advantage of a much better offensive environment. And yeah, Seattle, it's a big park, obviously, and I think we've always known that, but there are environmental factors that make Seattle a better pitching park. But also, I think we're starting to understand a little better that park factors aren't just how the ball travels or how big the fences are. It's how do guys see the ball? And there are some parks where hitters seem to see the ball really well. Kansas City is an example of a park that we talked a lot about it this year. It is a really big park, but it plays well for offense because hitters just seem to see the ball really well and strikeout rates go down there. And Seattle has the opposite. It's one of the most extreme parks in baseball for strikeout rate. And certainly the Mariners rotation takes advantage of it. Miller, I struggle with him because look, if he's back in Seattle, I think he's probably going to remain really good. But the comp I made to him on him during the panel was, the X-Men character Darwin. He's a somewhat low. He was in First Class, I think. He's the guy who, like, his power is just he evolves to whatever the situation requires of him to survive.
Okay.
Right? Like he goes underwater and he grows gills, that kind of thing. And that's kind of been Bryce Miller's thing in the majors. Like, remember, he had that amazing, I think, 6 starts with an ERA below 1 to open his career, and he was throwing like 85% fastballs. And he talked about, like, I don't need anything but the fastball, so why would I throw it? And as the season went on, he got hit harder. He starts introducing a changeup and a sweeper and a slider. And he's talked about how he just hasn't figured out how to throw those pitches out of the same arm slot as his fastball. So, like, the slider and sweeper especially look good. Like, the stuff metrics love them. And batters just don't swing. They just spit on them. And so he introduces the splitter at the beginning of last season, has a great month to start. May and June, he's really bad. If you remember, I think early on, I was like, I think Bryce Miller might be a top 40 pitcher, and then he stunk as the summer started. And we were like, well, we're back to that. Bryce Miller's just a guy. And then the second half of the season, he's awesome. He's one of the best pitchers in baseball. And I think the curveball helps because it gives him something that moves left to right that he can throw for strikes, throw out of the zone, and it, at least so far, doesn't seem to have the same issue as the slider and sweeper where hitters just don't care. Like they can identify them too quickly and know what they're coming. So that I think is a pretty good sign for Bryce Miller. But then you have the home road splits that make it like, I think the Mariners seem almost certain to try. Like, this is not reporting yet, but the way their season went and the makeup of the team, it seems all but certain they're going to trade one of the pitchers. And
yeah, I think it would be borderline irresponsible if they didn't.
Yeah, and I think the preference would be Luis Castillo. He's the most expensive of them. He's the oldest. He, I would say, is pretty clearly in decline. There's some really worrying trends there, but the rest of the teams in Major League Baseball also have access to Baseball Savant. It's not just me. And they can see that, yeah, that might not make a lot of sense. So, you know, if you want to go get an impact player, like you and I have talked about Jarren Duran to Seattle and how that would seem to be a good fit of team needs, I don't think Luis Castillo is getting that done. It might be someone like Bryce Miller. And given the home road splits, it's concerning.
Yeah, no, that's fair. That's a really good point. On to the next thing that you learned here in First Pitch Arizona. Nick Pollock and Eric Samolsky both have Jacob deGrom, Shane McClanahan, Shane O'Mac, and Shohei Ohtani in their top 8 starting pitchers from their rankings podcast recording. So for reference, Scott has Ohtani at SP 27, Scott White, Jacob deGrom at SP 28, and Shane McClanahan at SP 42. So wildly different rankings here early in the offseason. For what it's worth, again, I mentioned Steamer projections are out. They have each of McClanahan, Ohtani, and deGrom as top 11 starting pitchers for next year. And Chris, you brought up a good point to me, is that all 3 of these guys are coming off of a second elbow surgery. For McClanahan and deGrom, it's confirmed the second Tommy John. Remember Ohtani, they asked him last offseason, and he's like, it wasn't a Tommy John. It was something different. Although
they've been cagey about it. Yeah.
I mean, maybe it was the internal bracing, but I don't think that they ever actually revealed what it was. So,
and if you look at the history, I mean, I think Walker Buehler is fresh in our minds for coming back from a second Tommy John surgery. And I thought, yeah, he's just going to be Walker Buehler. And he wasn't, I think it's fair to say. And look, he did look much better in the postseason. Looked really good in the postseason. The stuff models were significantly better over the final 2 starts, especially got a ton more break on basically all of his pitches. And I don't know if we've talked about this on the podcast, but he said something about how before then he was like not sure about, you know, going all out with the elbow because he was trying to make it to the postseason. He knew that they needed him and he knew that they needed innings. Once he got to the World Series and I guess the NLCS, it was like, well, this is it. You know, like if I get hurt, I get hurt, and we got a whole off season. So it did sound like he let go a little bit at the end. And I don't know how sustainable that will be, but I do want to point out, it's not all bad news, right? Like Nathan Eovaldi is an example of a guy who had a second Tommy John surgery. Post 2017, I think, is when the second one was, if I'm remembering correctly. And
I'll look it up.
He is not only still a very effective pitcher, I think inarguably the best stretch of his career has been post second Tommy John surgery. There have still been a lot of injury issues over the course of that time. He has made more than 25 starts twice in that stretch, and it always feels like he's really good until he's not. But it's not all terrible news for guys coming back from second Tommy John surgeries. But yeah, like I said, it would, if you were getting a top 10 season out of Ohtani, McClanahan and DeGrom and McClanahan especially, those would be the biggest success. Like those would probably be the 3 best seasons ever by a pitcher coming back from a second Tommy John surgery. So that is tough. And look, I think the logic that they're going with for the most part is reasonable. Just rank by talent. Pitchers get hurt, and trying to predict pitcher injuries or trying to predict what pitchers won't get injured is kind of a fool's errand, right? Sandy Alcantara was the model of health and consistency right up until the point where he ruptured his ligament. And
so was Garrett Cole before
Garrett Cole's
retraining. Yeah.
And so I think there's something to that. I just don't necessarily know if you can expect guys coming back from a second Tommy John surgery to just be themselves. That's the struggle. And I think specifically more so with DeGrom, if he's good, he's just going out there, right? Like DeGrom is the only one of those 3. If he threw 190 innings this season, I would be surprised. I would be shocked if McClanahan got there. I will go on the record and say there is 0.0% chance Shohei Ohtani throws even 180 innings in a regular season. That's just like mathematically not going to happen.
I would be shocked, Chris, if any of these 3 got it to 180. Shocked. DeGrom has not had.
I would be shocked. Yeah, I would be shocked if Jacob DeGrom stayed healthy.
Yeah.
So I guess I'll rephrase it. Granting the caveat that Shane McClanahan, Jacob DeGrom, and Shohei Ohtani stay healthy all year, I don't think that is likely to happen for any of them. If it did happen, I think Jacob DeGrom could get to 180 innings pretty easily. I think it's really unlikely McClanahan does. And I again, there's no way even a healthy Shohei Ohtani gets to 180 innings next season. That's my point. Is that DeGrom, I think, won't,
when he pitches, he'll go like 6 or 7 consistently.
Yeah, he'll go 6, 7 consistently, and they're not gonna there's no reason to baby him, right? Like this is a team that wants to make the World Series. They're already paying him. Like that money's locked in. So I think that's the one. But I had him, I think, 40th when I first did my rankings, or 38th or something. So clearly I need to move him. Clearly any draft I'm doing with Nick and Eric, and they do the On the Corner podcast. Clearly any podcast, any draft I do with those guys, I'm not getting him. But I understand the thought process and the logic behind it. And if you're going to just rank by talent, yeah, those guys are just about as talented as anyone. And so it was interesting to see, some really smart people be really, really bullish on those guys in particular. And are we talking about Garrett Crochet later?
He is next up, him and Paul.
Okay,
Skenes.
There we go.
Yeah. So yeah, that's the next item that we have here. Eno Saris, who obviously is fantastic. He's from the Rates and Barrels podcast and The Athletic. He updated his Stuff Plus model, and Garrett Crochet and Paul Skenes had the biggest jumps, and arguably the 2 best pitchers in baseball based on that model. And you have in parentheses here that Nick Pollock also has Garrett Crochet as his SP3 heading into 2025. So in that mock draft we did last week, Paul Skenes went 18th overall. He was drafted as the SP2 in that draft. Overall pitching just kind of went later than I thought that it should. And later than I think it will once we get to actual 2025 drafts. And Crochet went 78th overall as the SP20.
That's wild.
Yeah, and I think he lasted entirely too long. He also went 65th in my in that early NFBC draft that I'm doing as well. I think if you want Garrett Crochet, now is the time to be drafting.
Jumping some drafts now.
Because once he gets traded, once people realize, okay, once they dive in and they look at projections and they see the Stuff Plus and they realize, all right, he's not going to be as limited as he was last year with the White Sox. It's just going to be all systems go. I just think it's going to be like a rocket ship up ADP for Garrett Crochet.
And that's another one I think Nick brought up, that Crochet in September all of a sudden started throwing a sinker that was super effective and gave him another look. And so you look at that pretty narrow 90s velocity band that he works in for the most part. You've got the four-seamer, then you got the cutter playing off of that, and then you got the sinker playing off of that in the opposite direction, all like, 92 to 99 between those three pitches. And it's just, that feels like a pain to try to hit against, especially when he's a gigantic dude who I think is 99th or 100th percentile in extension and has really good shape on all of his pitches. I think, and again, we mentioned Nick and the way he was approaching it and just ranking talent. I think if you're just ranking talent, you can legitimately make a case that Garrett Crochet is right there with Tarek Skubal and Paul Skenes as the best pitcher in baseball on a per inning basis. He was, I think, number one in K- walk rate by like a pretty substantial margin among pitchers who threw at least 140 innings. I'm going to pull that up right now. Yeah, he was 29.6% K- walk rate. Just for some context, Dylan Cease had the sixth highest K rate at 29.4%. Garrett Crochet, that was his K- walk rate. So he led baseball in K rate at 35.1% among pitchers with at least 140 innings, and had an elite walk rate. He had the 15th lowest walk rate in baseball. So I think I had Garrett Crochet 14th in my first round of pitcher rankings, and I think it would be really easy to move him up into, frankly, like the top. Him versus Chris Sale, I think I'd probably just give the edge to Chris Sale.
Yeah.
Certainly currently on a better team. I would love to hear the Braves come out tomorrow and say, oh, his back is fine, by the way. That was just like a 2-week thing, and it was just really bad timing. I would love to hear them say that because I'd feel a little better about it. But I think you can make a case for Garrett Crochet in that range. Absolutely.
Yeah. No, I thought you were going the other way, Chris. The weird thing about his back is that it's located on his elbow. And,
it was his back, right?
It was his back, but just the way my brain works and like how many arm injuries he's had in his career. My first thought is like, why do they keep pushing him back? This is so weird.
Yeah.
Like they're not putting him in, a potential must-win game. And yeah, it just all felt so weird to me. But again, that's just me being like skeptical. And maybe Chris Hale will be fine and he'll throw 180 plus innings again next year and he'll be fantastic.
For what it's worth, Chris Sale and Garrett Crochet might have been like the two most controversial pitchers discussed at First Pitch Arizona. I think Nick had him outside of his top 20 or in like or in the 15 to 20 range. And there was a lot of discussion about Crochet. I think his ADP in there's only been like 15 drafts completed on NFBC so far, but his ADP there is like 53. And there were some people who I would smash that every single time I'm drafting. And there were some who would say, I wouldn't take him within 50 picks of that. And so it was interesting to see how wide the range of opinions on Crochet was. But the Stuff Plus model, obviously, to get back to that point, they made some adjustments. There was a panel on the adjustments they made to Stuff Plus. Specifically, I think that the biggest thing was to try to account for the quality and effectiveness of sinkers and changeups better, because those are really hard pitches to account for. And when they made those changes, Crochet added a sinker. Skenes has the splinker and a sinker and a changeup. Remember that one? Didn't Paul Skenes have a start where he just threw his changeup a ton and got 11 whiffs with it, randomly in the middle of the season? He might just be a freak who just can do whatever he wants with a baseball. But yeah, if you are bullish on those two guys, that's a reason to be so. And I will say in NFBC drafts, which it's worth noting are predominantly high stakes leagues, predominantly bigger tournament style leagues where you kind of need big wins in order to get, real money in them. I think Paul Skenes will be SP2 and ADP. I think he will be taken as the SP1. more than any other pitcher besides Skubal, certainly. I think there's a chance he goes in the top 5 more than Skubal, even though Skubal gets drafted ahead of him more often, if that makes sense.
Yeah, this early draft that I'm in, Skenes went 4th overall. And I think Skubal went like early 2nd round.
It's hard for me to Paul Skenes is incredible. It is hard for me to conceive of a realistic outcome in which he's significantly better than Tarik Skubal was in 2024. It's hard to be much better. And Skubal was also much better in 2023 than he was in 2024. Remember, he had the best xERA among all pitchers who threw at least 80 innings. And I think even if you lowered it to 60, it was like him and Felix Bautista. It was like only relievers who were anywhere close to him. So I get the Skenes hype. I will probably have to make a conscious decision in one league exactly to say I'm going to take Paul Skenes, and that's probably the only one I'm going to draft him in.
Yeah, maybe you do it in an auction or something like that where you can kind of build your plan around getting Paul Skenes. Let's take our final break. When we return, a few other things you learned out at First Pitch Arizona, and we'll wrap up with some news and notes after that. Again, we're entering the offseason, so there's a lot happening already. We'll get to that right after this.
Baby, we are gonna start a fire.
From world-renowned clubs
Simply devastating.
to worldwide stars,
Wrexham have done it. This incredible ride continues.
the English Football League on CBS Sports Network, and stream every match live on Paramount Plus.
Welcome back in. A couple of the things that you learned out of First Pitch Arizona. And this one's just interesting. How do we not notice as the season was going on? Cole Ragans did not face the White Sox once in 2024. You can't remember where that came from, which panel, unfortunately.
Yeah, I'm sorry to whoever pointed that out, but I didn't write the name down. I had a little notepad because I was having computer issues, and let me tell you, I haven't really handwritten since 2006 when I stopped being in school. In high school, and I had bad handwriting then. I can't read my own handwriting now. I have no idea what I was trying to say. So I may have written the name down, and I just can't tell what it is.
Well, maybe Cole Ragans didn't face the White Sox because Seth Lugo had 10 of those starts this past season. Ragans was still awesome. 3.14 ERA, a 1.14 whip, 223 strikeouts, over 186 and a third innings, 14.4% swinging strike rate. He finished as the SP13 in Roto, the SP11 in head-to-head points. And I was a little surprised, Chris, to see early on in the Steamer projections, they have Ragans down at SP19. That feels a little low for Cole Ragans. Yeah,
that feels like a projection system that is just not equipped to handle the arc of Cole Ragans' career. And look, I don't know, maybe what he did with Texas matters. Maybe he just regresses back to that point, but I don't know. He's got a 5.32 career ERA in 64 innings with Texas and a 3 ERA in 258 innings since getting to the Royals. His skill set clearly changed in that time. We've talked a ton about it, but his fastball velocity went way up. He added that splitter in the second half of 2023. He's just a much different and much better pitcher than he was earlier in his career. So I don't really think there's much reason to be skeptical. And if you're looking for a reason to think, hey, maybe Cole Ragans can be even better in 2024 or 2025, the Royals as a whole had a 1.78 ERA in 13 starts against the White Sox. They went 12-1 against the White Sox. If you're wondering how the Royals made the playoffs, that explains a lot of it. They were basically, I think they were a game under 500 against everybody but the Chicago White Sox in 2024. I'm not saying they're frauds. They'll get to play the White Sox again. It's fine. Don't get mad. But Cole Ragans is probably going to get 2 or 3 starts against the White Sox next year. He's probably going to dominate them because they're probably going to be overmatched again. And that's a reason, if you're worried about a little regression, to think the landing could be really soft there.
I think it would be pretty hard for the White Sox to be worse than they were this
They
past
will be.
season.
I'm going to go ahead and say they will be at least 18 games better than they were. They will still probably be the worst team in baseball by that.
if they trade Crochet and Luis Robert, Chris,
Yeah.
I don't know if they're going to be 18 games better than they were this year, man.
It's like the Tigers in what was it, 2004, whatever year. What year was it? Where they set the record before that. I think they won like 23 games more the next year and still only won like 64 games. Like, I think they can be a normal bad team and still be better than they were last year. Trading Luis Robert and Garrett Crochet is going to make that incredibly difficult, though.
This current draft that I'm doing, we're going to keep referencing the mock draft we did, different drafts that we're kind of hopping in and things that we're noticing. But this draft that I'm in, Cole Ragans, I got him 57th overall as my SP2. So I started 3 hitters in a row, Tucker, Lindor, Machado, and then Corbin Burns and Cole Ragans. Honestly, if you told me I could have got Ragans in the 5th, I probably don't even take Corbin Burns in the 4th. And I do have some question marks about Burns myself, but I think I would be totally fine. If I could get like 4 great hitters and then get Ragans as my SP1, yes, sign me up for that.
Every single time. He's my number 6 SP. I'm very excited about him moving forward.
I was debating Corey Seager versus Corbin Burns. Like, really, it was a really tough call for me. Yeah.
I will say, like Burns was top 5 for both Nick and Eric in their discussion. They did like a whole thing where they did a Q&A about like their top 50 or so that for the On the Corner podcast. And Burns was, I think, 4 for both of them. And I think he's kind of just the default number 4 this year. But I feel like there's a lot of lack of excitement about Corbin Burns. And I do want to point out, if you tuned out in September and are for some reason tuning back in November, which would be a weird listening pattern, but back if you did, we talked about this at the time, how Corbin Burns talked openly about how he lost his cutter for a long time, going back to 2023, really. And it was only, I think the quote was, maybe you remember, I think the quote was something like, my cutter just became a bleepy 4-seamer.
Something like that, yeah.
And it impacted his numbers. Strikeout rate went way down. Whiff rate on the cutter went way down. Found it again in September. Was really awesome in September. Had a really good postseason. I think it was 2 starts with like 12 strikeouts in 2 starts. I don't. Corbin Burns is the default SP4. I think he's kind of in a tier of 1 because I do think there's I would take him a little bit ahead of Chris Sale and Cole Ragans, who are 5 and 6 for me. But getting both of them and only spending 2 of your first, 5 picks or 6 picks?
Yeah, 2 of my first 5, yeah.
Pretty good too, because I just wouldn't worry about pitcher again for like 6 or 7 rounds, and I would feel really good about how that looks.
I actually took Spencer Schwellenbach in the 9th, and then I just took Sonny Gray in the 12th. So maybe I'm overdoing it with pitching right now. I don't know.
I feel like there's going to be a lot of drafts where like you have to be really conscious of it, because I feel like pitchers might just get pushed down the board in a big way this year, and it might be hard not to go pitcher heavy if you're not conscious about it.
No, it's a good point, and I kind of felt like pitching has gone a little bit like later in this draft overall than I would have expected. You didn't get out to many AFL games, Chris. You did get to see one where Rays prospect Xavier Isaac was playing in right field, and he's an exciting prospect. He turns 21 in December. He got up to AA for 31 games a season. I'm not sure we will see him in 2025.
Yeah.
The Rays usually kind of slow their prospects, but he's mostly played first base and DH in his minor league career. So him playing right field is interesting because it gives the Rays another place to just kind of throw him out there if they wanted to.
Yeah, he's a big dude, and I only saw like 7 innings of him in right field, so I certainly don't want to claim to be an expert. It sounds like it's been a bit of an adventure, and it might not be a viable long-term option, but they're definitely giving him the opportunity, and that makes sense, right? Like, you don't want the worst kind of prospect to have is a first base only prospect, because there is no margin for error. They've got to be like, if you're just a good, like Andrew Vaughn is a decent hitter and he's a gigantic bust because he's first base only. Spencer Torkelson, like I think people would view Spencer Torkelson a lot differently if he was a second baseman. The standard is just so much higher. And so I don't mind them letting him try. But like you said, it's the Rays. He's only played 31 games above A-ball. He was not very good in those 31 games, struck out 54 times in 133 plate appearances. That's bad. He's also struck out 27 times in 67 plate appearances in the Arizona Fall League. So, the brakes might be getting pumped on Xavier Isaac, whether the Rays want them to or not. But they are a team that almost always has guys prove it at AAA before they get called up. So might not be super relevant for 2025, but he's got the skill set to move quickly if things start to click. So I just think that gives him another path out there.
All right, let's get into some news and notes. Off-season edition, as I mentioned, lots happening already. First up, Michael Wacha agreed to a 3-year, $51 million deal with the Royals, which includes a $14 million option for 2028. And Wacha has really revitalized his career. Last 3 years, a 3.30 ERA, a 1.16 WHIP. It's well below a strikeout per inning. It's like 7.8 K per nine, something like that. But he's a viable streamer and a legitimate back-end starter in deeper leagues.
Yeah, the Royals seem to just be going with Cole Ragans, and then what if we make the entire rotation out of Chris Bassett? And it might work, given the defense that they're able to put behind them, given, what we think is a pretty good offense. So I think it's a perfectly reasonable deal. Michael Wacha is not the type of pitcher I would ever want to guarantee multiple years to. Just feels like there are ways it can go wrong, but when he's out there, he has been very, very effective for 3 years now, like you said. So I don't really have any problem with it.
David Fry underwent surgery to repair a ligament in his elbow, and his timeline to return as a DH is 6 to 8 months.
Yeah.
And then it'll take 12 months for him to get back to throwing the ball regularly. So that means an estimated return as the team's DH sometime between May and July, which obviously is not great. Like, this is not someone we're going to be drafting. Like, maybe when he's returning, we'll pick him up and stream him in the right matchups for deeper leagues, something like that. He will have catcher eligibility next year. So I guess that can help in some 2-catcher leagues. But at least to start the season for the Guardians, it'll be Bo Naylor as the team's primary catcher with Kyle Manzardo likely at DH.
And I think takes him completely out of the draftable range in 2025. I'm not sure I would have drafted him as even a number 2 catcher anyway. I didn't really buy it, but I know Scott had him as I think top 20 guy at catcher when we talked about it earlier. So he'll have to revise that. And, hopefully maybe we'll see David Fry in June and he can give us some of that weird out of position speed.
Yeah. Clayton Kershaw said last Friday that he will undergo surgery on his toe and left knee this upcoming week. And he also declined his player option, but said that he will be back with the Dodgers in 2025. Whether or not he's ready for opening day, that we do not know. So we will wait for a timeline on Clayton Kershaw. We had a trade. The Angels Jorge Soler from the Braves in exchange for Griffin Canning. And Soler turns 33 in February. He had a down season. He hit 241, 21 home runs, 780 OPS. Sounds like he'll likely be in the mix between outfield and DH, although it seems like Mike Trout should probably be DHing a lot more than he has in years past. And Griffin Canning is just kind of one of those classic buy lows for the Atlanta Braves. Alex Anthopoulos has made a lot of these moves since he's taken over in that organization. So I don't know, maybe Canning kind of works his way into like stream in the right matchups, but for now, I don't know that this matters too much for fantasy on either side.
Look, it's November 5th of 2023. None of us are saying, hey, Reynaldo Lopez to the Braves. He's a must-start player. So, like, maybe they figure something out and unlock something there. But there's not a lot I can affirmatively say about Griffin Canning to be excited about. Like, he's got decent changeup and sliders, but a really bad fastball. And I'm not sure the other pitches have not been good enough, certainly in 2024. So I think that's one. Maybe we get to spring training, we hear good things, and the fastball looks a little livelier because it was down about 1.5 miles per hour this year. And maybe we can start to move him into a late round discussion, but I don't think I would draft him even in a 15 team.
Yeah, again, that is Griffin Canning and Soler. You know, if he stays healthy, can he pop 25 home runs with a bad batting average?
Yeah, absolutely. We are going to talk a lot on Thursday's podcast about how hard it was to find power after the first 6 or so rounds of our first mock draft. So it's the one thing Soler does.
That is true. The Oakland A's have officially dropped Oakland from their brand, and they will now just be referred to as the Athletics. For some reason, they're not adding Sacramento to their team name, despite planning to play there for, I don't know, at least the next 2 to 4 years.
I think it's at least 3. Yeah.
Yeah. So
I think the earliest opening date for their new ballpark, which has not been approved or anything, was 2028. That's only gonna keep getting pushed back. So yeah, I think it's at least the next 3 years.
Yeah. Pretty sad news as Alex Kirilloff announced his retirement last week. He's about to turn 27, but obviously has had a lot of trouble staying healthy and, even performing when he's on the field. It hasn't been great for him. He's cited it's taken a mental, physical toll on him. So obviously it's sad, but hopefully works out in his next chapter of life. Daniel Hudson also announced his retirement following the Dodgers World Series win last week. And, he pitched really well with the Dodgers the past couple of years. So
one of the rare double Tommy John success stories.
There you go. There's one. Let's get into the options. The first up, the ones that were exercised. We'll, spend a little bit of time on some of the bigger names, but, I don't think there's anything overly shocking here from this list. The Braves exercised Marcell Ozuna's $16 million option, and he just had a ridiculous season. He hit 302, 39 home runs, 104 RBI, and he finished as the 11th overall player in Roto, the 13th best hitter in head-to-head points. He went 58th overall in our first mock last week. That went to you, Chris. And I mentioned this early draft that I'm doing. I got Ozuna 81st overall. 81st.
There is either going to need to be a market correction once everybody realizes how many util-only players there are, or these guys are just going to remain huge discounts all year long because, look, Ozuna is almost certainly not going to be anything but DH eligible in 2025. At least Brent Rooker, we hope fairly early on he can get outfield eligibility. But Ozuna was a top 15 hitter last year and would not have been far off in 2023 either. We're going on multiple years of him being an impact bat and just getting pushed down because he's DH or util only. But the thing is, Shohei Ohtani is going to be the number 1 pick in most drafts, or a plurality of drafts, maybe. Brent Rooker is going to get drafted a lot. Marcell Ozuna. There's one more. Kyle Schwarber's the other one, the really big one. That's already a third of your 12-team leagues are going to be every single week starting someone at util who is util only. That's not including Jock Peterson and JD Martinez and Masataka Yoshida and, Giancarlo Stanton. Yeah, I'm not saying those guys are must starts, but I think there's a pretty good chance that even in a 15-team league, half the teams most weeks are starting a util-only player at util. And at that point, I don't think it really matters that they're only util. You'd rather have some flexibility. And if you're, if you're stuck between Corey Seager and Brent Rooker, okay, Corey Seager, he's a shortstop. That helps. But I do think these guys are, in almost every draft I've seen, usually really, really strong values. And 81st overall, for the numbers you're going to get from Marcell Ozuna, you're getting a 3rd round caliber player in the 6th or 7th. That's a 7th round pick.
7th round pick, yeah.
In a 15 team league.
No, it is a 12 teamer. This is 12 teamer.
Oh, 12. Okay. So that's awesome. So yeah, I think we're going to have to stop dinging the DH only guys for being DH only.
I think one of my early draft strategies is I'm going to go into every draft, and if I can get any of Rooker, Schwarber, or Ozuna outside of the top 50 picks, I'm going to do it every time.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what, yeah. Like we said, after you get outside the first, 4, 5, 6 rounds, power is kind of hard to come by. And all three of those guys should, on paper, provide pretty good powers.
They were all top 20 at worst.
Yeah.
In 2024. Obviously, they're not all going to have the same seasons they did, but there are almost no worrisome underlying trends for any of them either. Like Rooker's quality of contact was elite. He almost entirely lived up to his ex-Woba. Ozuna has been actually underperformed his ex-Woba most of his career. And then Schwarber obviously, traded some power for some contact last year, hit for a better batting average, but he's rock solid. We know that. So I'm gonna have one of those three guys as my DH in a lot of leagues, I think.
The Brewers exercised Freddie Peralta's $8 million option. He had a solid season, 3.68 ERA, 122 whip, 200 strikeouts on the nose. Cody Bellinger exercised his $27.5 million option for 2025 and will remain with the Cubs. He was solid this year, 266 with 18 home runs, 9 steals. Obviously, we do want more speed from Cody Bellinger. The D-backs exercised Eugenio Suarez's $15 million option. Bounce back year for him, where he hit 30 home runs with 101 RBI. The D-backs also exercised Merrill Kelly's $7 million option. Missed a lot of time with a shoulder injury, but was awesome in 2023. So hoping to recapture some of that magic. The Yankees exercised Luke Weaver's $2.5 million club option. No brainer, obviously. Strong season, strong playoffs. My guess is he's the favorite for the closer role if they don't make a move. And they might, because, they're losing out on a couple relievers. Clay Holmes is a free agent as well. Could they be in the mix for like a Devin Williams trade? Could they, try and bring in a veteran guy like a Kirby Yates? I don't think it's crazy. So we'll see, obviously, what the Yankees do this offseason. The Rays exercised Brandon Lau's $10 million club option. They also have an $11.5 million option for 2026. Rhys Hoskins exercised his $18 million player option. This is a pretty rough one for the Brewers, because Hoskins only did 214, 26 home runs, 722 OPS was a career low. He's a really bad fielder. So, they took a chance, and
I wouldn't be surprised if there was a bounce back, but yeah, I think they were probably secretly hoping that he would not do that. But of course, $18 million is a ton of money.
Yeah.
So
another one here, Jordan Montgomery exercised his player option worth $22.5 million. Disaster season for Montgomery, 6.23 ERA, 165 whip, well below a strikeout per inning. He's turning 32 in December. Chris, I refuse to believe that Jordan Montgomery is just done. Like, he just forgot how to pitch. It was just a weird offseason. He didn't sign until like right before opening day. So it's just a weird season all around. And I'm not saying he's going to be great, but can he turn into like a Michael Wacha type? I don't think it's crazy.
I like to think that even if it made financial sense for Montgomery to turn this option down, and it absolutely would not have, once the Diamondbacks owner made that statement about what a bad signing it was, he was guaranteed to take that option.
Yeah, that was pretty messed up too. But I guess you can't blame him for being honest, right? Look, in hindsight, it was a pretty bad signing.
Hold on, I have to open the door so that my fatter cat doesn't eat all of the food. But continue. I'll keep my headphones on.
Don't worry. I'll keep going. Lucas Giolito exercised his $19 million player option. He underwent an internal brace procedure way back in March of this year, and this year. And it's confident he'll be ready for the start of the 2025 season. Obviously, it's been a while since we've seen the good version of Giolito. So,
and this is another second elbow reconstruction, or I don't know how we categorize it, but yeah, he had Tommy John surgery once before.
Major elbow surgery.
Yeah.
I think that's fair to say. The Orioles exercised Ryan O'Hearn's $8 million club option, and as of now, O'Hearn looks like the strong side DH with Ryan Mountcastle at first base. Anthony Santander is a free agent. And the Orioles also exercised Sir Anthony Dominguez. who he'll likely serve as the setup man to Felix Bautista, and Hunter Renfroe exercised his $7.6 million player option. Looks like he's penciled into right field for now. Obviously, the Royals can still make some moves.
Trade Ryan Mountcastle.
Please. I mean, I don't think this would happen. Same division, but like, I think the Yankees are going to be in the market for first baseman.
That'd be a good fit.
That'd be pretty cool.
Yeah.
What kind of odds am I getting for DJ LeMahieu being their starting first baseman on opening day? I just feel like it's a lock for the Yankees.
That's gross.
3 more years left on that deal for TJ LeMahieu.
Who could have seen it coming?
Options declined in recent days. This was
fun. This was a fun little.
Garrett Cole opted out of his contract with the Yankees on Saturday. Everyone is freaking out, losing their minds. The Yankees could have voided the opt-out by adding an extra year worth $36 million to his current contract, which I believe is 4 years, $144 million. That's what's left on the deal. Then on Monday, Jeff Passan reported that Cole will remain with the Yankees on his remaining deal. Essentially, it's as if Cole did not opt out.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. Cole was like, dare me to do it. And the Yankees called his bluff, and he's like, I'm not going to do it.
JK.
And then I'm going to, if you guys will take me back, then I'll be back. They're like, yeah, sure. We like you, Garrett Cole. And that's how it went down. As expected, Blake Snell declined his $30 million player option and will be a very sought-after free agent. The Brewers declined Devin Williams' $10 million club option, but he remains with the Brewers as he's entering his final year of arbitration. GM Matt Arnold said they will stay, quote, open-minded regarding a potential trade. I don't want to say it's a lock, Chris, but it kind of feels like this is going to happen.
Yeah, for sure. And that this was a little scummy. Like, yeah, they're going to save like $1 million in arbitration by doing this. And it's like, all right, get your $1 million, I guess. But yeah.
Yep. The Rangers declined Nathan Eovaldi's $20 million option, but have great interest in bringing him back. And Eovaldi turns 35 in February, but was still solid. Once again, 3.80 ERA, a 1.11 WHIP. 166 strikeouts over 170 and 2/3 innings. Sean Bonilla declined his $13.5 million player option and is now a free agent. He obviously had that resurgent season after dropping his arm slot, trying to follow that Chris Sale mold, and worked out very well for him. Ha-Sung Kim declined his $8 million mutual option and will enter free agency. He's also recovering from shoulder surgery and could miss the start of the season. The Braves declined Travis d'Arnaud's $8 million club option, and
he's almost surprising because it had been reported that they were picking up him, Marcell Ozuna, and one of the relievers. I can't remember. That this was reported a couple weeks ago, and I was kind of bummed because Travis d'Arnaud is the only like even moderately decent free agent catcher. So now he'll hopefully sign somewhere else, and he's a solid number 2.
He hit 15 home runs this year in 99 games, and he still graded out pretty, not great, but he's
a starter.
It's like around average defensively. So yeah, I mean, look, some team can use Travis d'Arnaud as a starter, and so that could help us out. We get another second catcher in there. I think obviously on the Braves side of things, they're looking for a big bounce back from Sean Murphy. They're kind of rehanding him the keys as their everyday catcher. I think the fact that they have a prospect in their system that's coming kind of gave them more confidence that they could let Travis d'Arnaud go. And that prospect is Drake Baldwin, who he's 23 years old, had a strong season in the minors, is playing well in the Arizona Fall League. And I think as of now, he's probably the backup. So,
yeah, no, I think that's a name to keep an eye on, certainly in NL only leagues. I think the problem with Murphy is he played so much at the beginning of 2023 and just completely burned out. He talked about it, just caught up with him. He was awesome in the first half, really bad in the second half, and hasn't really, he had the oblique injury this year that I think explains why he wasn't great this year. But I have to think they'll be fairly careful with his playing time, but not as careful as they were when d'Arnaud was there. So yeah, in a best case scenario, I think Baldwin maybe plays like 40 games. But he's an interesting player to keep an eye on if something happens to Murphy.
Reliever David Robertson declined his $7 million mutual option and is now a free agent. He still is pitching well despite being, I believe, 40 years old now at this point. And should earn a high leverage role somewhere around the majors. Jock Peterson declined his $14 million mutual option and will become a free agent. He's coming off a great year, hit 275 with 23 home runs and a 908 OPS. Certainly could be a strong side platoon for some team. Frankie Montas declined his mutual option. The Mariners declined Jorge Polanco's option. The White Sox declined Yoan Moncada's $25 million option, maybe the easiest call of the offseason so far. The Cardinals declined both Lance Lynn and Kyle Gibson. The Orioles declined Eloy Jimenez, and the Yankees declined Anthony Rizzo. 13 players received the qualifying offer, which is now up to a 1-year, $21.05 million deal. Christian Walker, Max Fried, Corbin Burns, Anthony Santander, Nick Pivetta, Nick Martinez, Alex Bregman, Teoscar Hernandez, Willie Adames, Pete Alonso, Sean Manaea, Luis Severino, and Juan Soto. Of those names, I think maybe Severino, Pivetta, and Martinez would consider it, but I don't know that it's a lock that any of those guys will actually accept it. So,
yeah, I think I could see Martinez or Manaea getting like $45 million over 3 years on free agency. So I'd be surprised if they accepted it. Severino almost feels like it'd be a best case scenario for both sides if he accepted it. Just like he gets another year to try to continue to rebuild his value, maybe get one more 4 or 5 year deal if he has a good year. And the Mets could use a not cheap pitcher, but like they're not overflowing with arms. So they could probably use Severino on another 1 year deal. I think they'd like to remain as flexible as possible moving forward based on what we've seen the last couple of years. So that's the one Severino. I could see him accepting it.
Mm-hmm. And as expected, the Cardinals did not extend the qualifying offer to Paul Goldschmidt, who will enter free agency. And actually, by everything that I've read, it sounds like the Cardinals are going to be actually cutting payroll this offseason.
Yeah.
So
Arenado seems like a trade candidate.
Sonny Gray, I think. Wilson Contreras.
Would love to see Wilson Contreras traded somewhere. This is a team that has between Pages and I'm blanking on Ivan Herrera. I think those two can clearly hold their own at least at the major league level. And like a Wilson Contreras return to Chicago would make a lot of sense. It's a decent amount of money remaining. I think it's like 3 years, $60 or $70 million. So that's a hurdle for a 34-year-old catcher. He's still really good when he's on the field, though.
As a hitter,
yeah,
like top 3 in OPS and ISO among catchers over the past.
Honestly,
2 or 3
he's good enough to just be a DH. Like if someone just didn't want him to play catcher, like I think he could be an 800 OPS as a DH bat.
You know what? That's what I thought of before I read that they were going to cut payroll. I figured they're not bringing back Goldschmidt. They might just play Contreras at first base.
Yeah.
Although I guess they have Alec Burleson too. So, but he could DH. Well, we'll see. Yeah. I mean, Contreras maybe at this point in his career, kind of heading towards that Salvador Perez path. A little bit of first, a little bit of DH.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe he's kind of your backup catcher at this point, something like that. But yeah, if he's on the field, I still think Wilson Contreras can play. So I agree with you there. I did want to get to some of the offseason, like just the top names that are free agents, blah, blah, blah. But we're kind of up against it, Chris. So we'll see if we have some time a little bit later on in the week. I think most people kind of know the big name free agents at this point anyway, though. But yeah, that'll do it. We're going to wrap there. For Chris, I am Frank. Thanks as always for tuning in to Fantasy Baseball today. Please make sure to follow and leave a 5-star rating on Apple or Spotify. And we will be back again on Thursday. Bye-bye.